Welcome to a special edition of A Spot of Poetry, featuring outstanding poetry written by outstanding poets. I'm your host, Joe Pizzo. Today's special edition features a poet whose work is closely connected to her Korean heritage, her Chinese heritage, and the fact that she was born in the United States. Our featured author celebrates all three cultures and displays her cultural roots throughout her writing. Born in Los Angeles, California, and raised on the West Coast, she did not set out to become a poet in her early years. She spoke English only when she was growing up, never having been taught Korean by her mother or Chinese by her father. During her studies at UCLA, our author studied art history in France during her junior year at the Université de Bordeaux. Upon her return from France, she began UCLA's Immigrant Children's Art Project. A Yale Law School graduate who practiced corporate and labor law, our author didn't enjoy the field of law. Rather, she wanted to do something else. On Scholastic.com, she says, "I wanted to do something more important with my life. I couldn't think of anything more important than working with kids. I had done a little bit of substitute teaching while I was in law school, and being a teacher is the hardest work I have done. I knew I wouldn't survive as a teacher. One day, while browsing in a tiny children's bookstore, I decided I wanted to write books for children." Our featured author struggled at first as a writer of children's books, receiving many rejections. Nonetheless, she persevered. She has presently written 35 books. Her first book of poetry, entitled Good Luck Gold and Other Poems, was published in 1994 and was followed by other works of poetry. These feature the author's life and multiple ethnicities. She served as the writer-in-residence to the University of Southern California Writing Project in 1995, and a visiting author to the Singapore Society for Reading and Literacy in 1997. Her strong commitment to the importance of literacy is highlighted by her awards from the International Reading Association, the Claremont Graduate School, and Penn State University. She has also been selected to be a member of the Commission on Literature of the National Council of Teachers of English. Today's special edition of A Spot of Poetry features a very special author, Janet Wong. 3 different short poems from A Suitcase of Seaweed and More are being featured, each representing an aspect of Wong's tricultural heritage. In addition, the information that provides the backstory for each poem will be shared. Our first poem, featuring Wong's Korean heritage, is appropriately entitled A Suitcase of Seaweed. Across the ocean, from Korea, my grandmother, my Halmoni, has come. Her suitcase sealed shut with tape, packed full of sheets of shiny black seaweed and stacks of dried squid. We break it open, this old treasure chest of hers, holding our noses tight as we release its ripe sea smell. Here is the accompanying background. We were waiting for my Korean grandmother at LAX, the Los Angeles airport. It was Halmoni's first trip to the United States. We spotted her coming out of customs, dragging her heavy suitcase. It was almost bursting, held shut with duct tape. Lucky thing the customs officers didn't require her to open it. I guessed that it was filled with presents for me. Traditional Korean dresses called hanbok, which are quite large and puffy. Traditional Korean shoes shaped like canoes. Maybe Korean paper fans too, which didn't fold up. When we got home, we cut the suitcase open with a knife. Seaweed? Squid? I was so disappointed. It was 1975 or 1976. Halmoni had brought these things with her because she remembered receiving letters from my mother years earlier about how she couldn't find any of her favorite Korean foods in America. Now there are dozens of Korean grocery stores in Los Angeles, but in 1960, when my mother first arrived in this country, there were none. For many weeks, I refused to eat the seaweed, squid, and fish. I was angry that these things had taken up space in that suitcase, a suitcase which should have held dresses for me instead. In the end, though, I ended up loving the dried squid. My mother cooked it by holding it over an open flame on our gas stove. the tentacles curled up crispy and charred. She tore the squid up into thin strips. Yum! It was better than the best beef jerky. Our second poem, featuring Wang's Chinese heritage, is entitled Shrimp. Around and around and around it spins on the lazy Susan, that last piece of shrimp. I am too ashamed of my appetite to look at it again, so instead I force my eyes to wander, looking at paintings of fish and crab and shrimp. Instead, I look at the waiters walking from the tanks with nets of thrashing fish and wriggling shrimp. Instead, I look around the table, measuring the hills of peeled shell piled on my mother's plate, my father's plate, my brother's plate, my brother's plate. This shrimp is mine. Here's the backstory. Chinese families often eat family style, where we share food that is placed in the middle of the table. When you're at home, you might feel comfortable grabbing whatever you feel like eating, your chopsticks flying in like seagulls. But when you're eating in a restaurant with your grandparents and uncles and aunts and cousins, you might feel a little more reserved, holding back on second and third and fourth helpings until the lazy Susan has had a couple of chances to spin around. Toward the end of the meal, as everyone tries to decide whether to keep on eating or to stop, there might be just one or two pieces of food on each shared plate. When two of you reach for the lazy Susan at the very same moment, spinning in opposite directions, both going for the last bites of food, awkward. Our third poem features Wang's American heritage, and it's entitled Manners. If you are Chinese and you eat out of a porcelain bowl, you may pick it up and push the rice into your mouth with your chopsticks, feeling a bit like a pig digging in. But it is okay if you are Chinese. If you are Korean, though, you must leave your stainless steel bowl sitting on the table, even if it has gone cold while you barbecue beef for your father. And if you are half and half, like me, born in LA and hungry all the time, you might wonder if you aren't better off sticking with a knife and a fork. Here is some information that puts one of Wang's dilemmas into perspective. If you opened the kitchen cabinets in my house when I was growing up, you would find a mishmash of dishes, colorful Chinese plastic dishes, delicate blue and white Japanese porcelain bowls and plates, a few Korean metal rice bowls, lots of sturdy Corningware, and souvenir coffee cups from Solvang. The dishes matched our diet. We ate all kinds of food, not just Chinese and Korean, but burgers, spaghetti, pizza, tacos, sushi, tempura, Danish butter cookies. My mother's favorite food for a while was Salvadoran pupusas, which we bought from a food truck downtown. My favorite foods were shrimp dumplings, wonton noodle soup, shrimp tempura, French fries, my mother's potato salad, hash browns, and potato chips. I often carry a potato in the poetry suitcase that I bring to schools, and even just looking at it makes me happy. I think I need to put a plastic shrimp in there too. Thank you for joining me for this special edition of A Spot of Poetry, featuring outstanding poet Janet Wang and her outstanding poetry. Be sure to watch for my special podcast, A Writer's Journey, featuring an interview with our featured author, Janet Wang. For A Spot of Poetry, I'm Joe Pizzo.